And Andrea, just in time. Now we can start. All right. So before we move on, I definitely want to recognize the team behind the scenes. There's quite a few of those. So for the PDA New England Executive Committee of Volunteers, stand up. I know there's a number of you here. So I see Mark, I know Priya's somewhere. Priya's right there. Pradeep, Nirmal, and I would say actually a special call out to Nirmal. Right here. So really, he spent a lot of time pulling this together, a lot of work. Really, thank you so much for pulling it out together. And of course, it's funny because I should know none of this event tonight was planned by AI. Although after seeing what he's pulled together, I wonder if Nirmal is actually AI. So, of course, last I'd be remiss not to say thank you to Akamai. So Emma, where are you? Well, Hema has spent a lot of time and has been fantastic pulling all this together. Again, fantastic space. I think this is one of the cooler venues that we've enjoyed. So hopefully you're enjoying that as well. Because without her, this would not have happened. So tonight, we'll get through this quick, I promise. We have a fantastic program lined up. So we have a keynote from Trond, who many of you have met. We have a short break for a surprise guest, which will be interesting, I think. Sorry, Lena, no magician this time. And then followed by a panel discussion on AI talent and the future of workforce strategy. Really quick, what's coming up? May 20th, there's going to be a new members connect. So that'll be a 1 hour virtual session at 8 a.m. June 15th, surprise, surprise, this will be the first in a series of wine dinners in different places, top chefs. That will be in Southbridge, Massachusetts. June 24th, cybersecurity program with Eileen and Grant Thornton in Boston, and then a bunch of other things as we go forward. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Trond. So many of you may remember him from the symposium that happened last year, but I think he's really going to bring an interesting and relevant perspective and timely to the intersection of technology and governance and leadership and the other things that come along. So please join me in Trond.
So one of the things that you, a smart futurist does is not speak about the future at all, right? I'm not that smart because the problem is you get invited to speak about the future. But there's some truth there because everybody in a sense has now become a futurist. So this is a bit of a problem for my profession, right? Because everybody has an AI, so like what is another futurist going to contribute? And I think that's sort of part of the risk that is happening with AI. And I want to speak to specifically to workshops around that. One is kind of the missing rung problem. So if you think of a ladder, and I built my own ladder this year for my bookcase, and in my hallway, and I did have some issues because if some of the lower rungs are not fastened correctly, you have real issues. You can't get to the next level. And I think we are in danger of forgetting that with AI because, people worry about, automation and will there be 20, 30, 40% of the workforce, be affected by this? But the real issue really is if you're trying to make economy very quickly by AI and you forget training and reskilling and the juniors, then you have a real issue. The other thing that I think boards do need to worry about is, the same AI obviously is opposite outcomes. And I am old enough that, I started out doing research on the internet and the impact of digital, basic digital. And the same discussion was happening there. We were like, doctors will cease to exist. Smart people will go into their doctor's office and, will eradicate diseases in and of themselves because they have the World Wide Web. None of this really happened. Some of it did, of course. All of us have walked into a doctor's office and, known more about a particular disease. I remember scaring, a few hospital doctors when my mother had a very severe pneumonia and they thought I was an actual doctor and the whole thing. And she did get better. And I did, scream enough that they actually put her on, they started basically, doing procedures they wouldn't have done for the average person. So, I mean, you can fake it until you make it, but, with AI, and this was just with the internet. But generally, you cannot guarantee that your workers will all be benefiting from this. And I'll be very specific later about two kinds of things that seems to be happening. And the last thing, of course, is that without redesigning an organization, the effects you get out of it are very short-term efficiencies. And then the long-term could possibly just be, adverse effects. So if you are not a futurist and you're an economist, right? So you look at very big macro trends, then the picture looks a little bit like this. So, obviously in the olden days, we were all farmers. And then now nobody is a farmer, but we are all in healthcare and services. But when it comes to AI, this isn't particularly informative because thinking about the future this way, is one sector going to do better than the other sector? Leaving aside the fact that these sectors don't even look anything like they used to look. So, what does it even mean to be in the manufacturing sector today? And this is highly relevant because you think, the unskilled workers, the people in manufacturing. Well, I wrote a whole book about augmented lean, which is basically how untrained, unskilled workers are now benefiting from tremendously advanced on-screen real-time information and are essentially beating robots at their own game and are fully literate. While producing something fairly simple, they have computer access to knowing the impact of every little move they make. So it's not as easy as, there's skilled and unskilled. And there's sectors that are lagging and sectors that are leading. All of this stuff the economists have taught us, and none of it is actually true. So now, what are the scenarios? Well, there's, obviously, there's the case that this is not really going to affect generally in any kind of sector, and then, there's just going to be regular employment growth. Or there's the sort of the mid scenario, which most people, I would say, have adopted, which is, this is going to impact about 20% of the workforce. Then there is always the possibility that 300 million, and this is a very conservative high scenario, essentially many and most workers in the organizations you run are going to be deeply affected by AI. And, I've just taken 2030 as like it's the closest possible future where there actually is some real data. Because that's the other thing. A very, very smart futurist always talks about 30 years in the future because either I will be dead or famous. Either case, I don't care so much, right? But talking about 2030, I will probably not be dead, probably not be famous. So it's a real issue for me. And Glenn has already promised that I can take his name and put that on the book because I will only guarantee these findings for about 3.5 years. Anyway. So the missing rung is about this. Basically, entry-level workers, no one is investing in them right now. And this has happened very, very fast. It means that your son and daughter who goes to college has absolutely no value for the college education. It's worthless. And I'm saying this as a parent of a college kid paying this same amount of money because she doesn't agree with me. But okay, I'm telling you right now, college is not worth a dime. So that's a real issue. There are no jobs for juniors. No matter if they graduate from Harvard, whatever, it doesn't matter at all. Now, the problem, of course, with AI is that it actually cannot do anything. So we talk about agentic AI. That does not mean that we are outsourcing doing anything at all to AI. It just means that we are one little step closer to trusting AI with the next step beyond Googling. So AI can draft super advanced plans. In fact, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I have been so deeply into AI that I'm getting bored at my own profession. So I was super excited for about 6 to 8 months. Now, everything that I did well, an AI does better. So when I then train 15 AIs to work with me 24/7, it's essentially I am kind of like that manufacturing worker. I feel like I'm obviously getting a lot of benefit, but in order to get that benefit and get ahead of you and you and you and you, I have to work more, train the AIs better, and by training them better, my own work becomes more boring. I find that a little interesting. I don't know how long it's going to last. It's my current feeling. Because AI can't pass the audit. This is very relevant for board members, right? AI can simply just inform you better. There are now board member AIs. All of that stuff is relevant, but you will have the vote. If you haven't stopped an AI project by the end of this year, quit. Don't be a board member. You're not doing your job. There are going to be AI projects that are disastrous for your organization. Stop them. So, this is the real issue, right? So people talk about automation. I am not so interested in that. I love robots, they are going to make a big dent, but the real interesting difference here is between algorithmic management, which is people are doing AI to you, i.e. to your workforce. Certain categories of workforce are going to be bored, like me. They are going to be surveilled. They are going to be probably having a pretty miserable time. They will be controlled the way a factory worker was controlled in the 18th century. And others will have this enormous emancipatory feeling of augmentation. They will feel super intelligent. These are the people who challenge me. They think they're futurists. They think they're super smart and know everything about the future. And if they don't, they can just ask ChatGPT. Go back 20 years, these are the same people that said about the internet, we are not the smartest people in the world, everything is egalitarian, there are no elites anymore. Have you seen any of this? And if you have, let me know. Because yes, some people get smarter, but usually the smarter people get smarter. And when the smarter people get smarter, you, by getting a little bit smarter, it's a little bit like with money. If you have a lot of money, you can make a lot of investments and be very wealthy. If you have a little bit of money, you have to be so much smarter than the people who have more money. I mean, you all know this. It's very logical, but information and knowledge works a little bit the same way. The only possible difference would be if knowledge itself ceases to have any value. And that is really the departure of my book. I basically said, what, if anything, is going to be valuable in the next 3 to 5 years if AI goes to 100? I'm not saying AI in 20 years, because I have no idea where AI is going, but I have a faint idea about what AI is doing right now and in the next 1 to 2 years. And if that pans out, I think these 12 things still will be relevant, and I'll just very briefly tell you. The foundation is basically, if your company does not have an idea of how they function in the overall system that includes planet Earth, people's wellness, essentially this idea that we live in an ecosystem, that is actually not something you can outsource to a machine. This kind of awareness, you need a bodily presence, you need to actually feel the pain of higher or lower temperature. You can't just you can't have a disembodied engagement with eco-awareness. Number 2, maker skills, right? It seems perhaps a little bit old-fashioned, but I will posit that nobody without MacGyver skills will survive in the next decade. Because MacGyver skills will also change. If you don't have them, you're not going to be able to pivot. You're not going to be able to make the most out of very little. And you're not going to be able to mobilize material resources around you. That's all that computers are, really, material resources around you. The third is mediation skills. Most of you in this room have it, right? It's kind of this generic, hyper communication ability, not just communicating, but mobilizing, connecting people. Many people here are super connectors. That is its own skill. No AIs are super connectors. They may have LinkedIn's LinkedIn network. They may be able to suggest who you should meet tonight, but as you all know, they're not going to be able to charm you over a glass of wine and actually make you meet them next week and join your board. And mobility is another skill that you have to have a body to possess, which is you choose where you are, you choose how to move around, where you spend the most time. That's actually the essence of mobility, is to make a very certain choice of I am here and I'm not there. If you can be 2 places at the same time, you're a genius. But you have to have operational command, basically, of the environment. So this is almost like a kind of a military skill. And then lastly, on these foundational skills is psycho-resilience. I couldn't come up with a easier term, but it's all it just means is that I think it's Elon Musk who says this. It's going to get very strange soon, and I think we are about entering that time where change is so hard to really deal with, understand. You may be okay, but the people around you may not deal with this kind of change so easily. You will, I predict in the next 2 years, your organization will have those issues. You'll have a cadre of workers, perhaps 10%, and they're going to feel estranged in the sort of sociological sense that people around the Industrial Revolution felt estranged. They didn't recognize the society they were in. They didn't, they felt isolated in a metropolis. All of these things are happening over again. I used to dream that I could have been born a sociologist in the 18th century to describe all these things. Little did I know, we are there again. So what are the more advanced skills that also are going to have to be in your organization? By the way, I forgot to say, none of these 12 skills really are individual skills. You are lucky enough if your organization even touches half of these skills. Think of it more as every team should have all of these skills. If you, as an individual, try to apply your 10,000 hours to these 12 things, you will die of exhaustion. And I think that's another interesting perspective because, the benefit here is your organization's combination of AI and individuals and teams and perhaps partners have to collectively have these skills, and then you will succeed. But don't walk around thinking you're going to start learning all these things, right? Because none of us do. I'm not claiming I know many of these things either. This is not possible for an individual to even look at, which is why we have organizations, which is why we have societies, why we have infrastructures. These things take time to build. And permanence, as you know, is AI's biggest challenge this decade. The moment AI achieves some sort of contextual permanence, the game is over. Then, we are actually past the AI industrial revolution and we're on to something else. Before that permanence, before there is true AI context, all we have is experience. We have no idea what it's going to lead to, and actually it could lead to absolutely nothing. So, these advanced integration skills address that. Not digging into R&D and knowing a little bit about this and that. No, having a full command of the entire domain of your organization, all of the domains, or at least having some sort of system that taps into all those things. Being able to actually augment where it makes sense and not use that kind of augmentation from AI when it doesn't make sense. That goes back to you as a board member. Have you stopped an AI project? Do you have any idea what the gating criteria would be to stop or start an AI project? Because if you don't, you are losing touch with the organization. You're probably not, as an organization, optimized between investments in AI and investment in workforce. And they're not let's have 1 hour and think about AI, and then let's have 1 hour and think about workforce. Never has the CTO and the human resource officers has had so much to talk about. It's essentially the same function. And agentic, I was very intrigued by the word agent when I wrote this book, and if you see it, I have tried to find all kinds of metaphors. Historically, there's a lot of different metaphors around, trusting another person. So, a lawyer is an agent is an important thing in trade, right? So you always have an agent that represents you. So there's something very powerful of the metaphor of agent, but I think we're still scratching the surface, honestly, about what we are going to trust technology with. I do not currently, for example, even though I spend about 22 hours a day on AI, I do not have any kind of trusted agent. I have a lot of agents, rogue agents, but I don't have any trusted agents. All right, so what's the most ambitious here? And I'm going to stop soon. The meta competencies are two. One is an interoperability mindset where you say, yeah, all of these things are happening, but I am fully aware of how they need to be stitched together, and things that look very easy could actually be completely disastrous over time. So you say, no, that technology is going to lead us down a rabbit hole that we can't get out. This technology is a little simpler. Maybe it's a good idea. Or in this area, our team does a great job. We don't need technology. Use as little technology as you can because it's always more complicated than it seems. So anyway, systems thinking is like impossible to talk about in 2 minutes and impossible to teach. I remember at Stanford, I was trying to figure out how to teach my students systems thinking in 2 hours. It's near impossible. Everybody who has ever written on systems thinking they have very complicated minds, and they use the physicists. None of that really helps for an undergrad who's going to learn something in 2 hours. Impossible. But I think if we don't have leaders that at least have the ambition to try to understand the totality of the organization they're dealing with and have some idea of what generally most of your clients care about, you're in trouble. So looking for these people, or looking for teams that have that as their responsibility becomes crucial. And it's important. This is truly perhaps the super board discussion. Which system is our organization a part of? Who do we have? Which teams, which hybrids of AIs and people and teams actually understand what's going on? And what does it mean to understand what's going on? That's what systems thinking is. There are many systems: health system, technological system, client system, supply chain system. Like society is a system. The problem is you have to model how all of this works. If you could find a digital twin that did that job, you'd be in luck. I'm trying to build one. It's not that smart. Working with Claude, or I combine all the AIs that exist in this world, but they don't have any kind of permanence. So the kinds of advice that all of these systems currently give you is basically just statistical modeling, and then when you leave them, they forget where they started and the context, and you have to start over again. So anyway, what are the 4 things that I think, and this is a lead up to the debate, there's many more than 4 things, but what should a board do in the next 24 months? Number 1, I think, put workforce, meaning technology and people, together on the board agenda always. Number 2, demand board grade data about your people and how they actually interact with technology. I am helping a startup called Answer with 2 R's, which is an AI and education startup in principle, but they are building a tool on AIQ, on AI intelligence. What does it mean to be smart with AI? But more importantly, perhaps, what does it mean to use AI to solve a problem in an actual domain? Right? Because who cares if you're good at AI now? Because in 2 months, that won't be valuable at all. Right? The mode of software has gone to 0. So the only valuable skill really has to do with how you can mobilize resources, knowing that knowledge as a value goes to 0 very, very quickly. Doesn't mean that knowledge ceases to exist, but it exists only as an ephemeral, temporary advantage. And number 3, I am really going to challenge you on this one. Shut down some AI projects. Get a good feeling for what a good AI project is, what a good AI leader is, and get a good feel for what the bad ones are. Because they could destroy your organization, and certainly most of them are going to be unprofitable. Lastly, the blend. AI is meaningless without the blend. Exactly how much will you invest per employee in AI, per team in AI? How are you going to assess if you gave Steven $300 a month and he spent it all on Anthropic, but he just Googled and Anthropic, wine knowledge, and didn't actually contribute to this board organization? We're going to have to track that.
I think it's
Even for high performers like Steven, this is important. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Show the data underneath the headcount. So if you're trying to save money, if your organization says, we are going to use AI this year to achieve efficiencies. Question that very seriously, because are you looking for a short-term or a long-term advantage? And what happens year two when you have outsourced all the smart decisions to an AI? That AI is probably outdated every 2 months. And now you have nobody that understands what your organization's business is. So I had a lot smarter people coming up on stage. My role is simply just to ask some dumb questions, and we'll hear from people who have domain experience and are battling this as board members and as executives every day. Thank you. This is the question. Wow, he left that up so briefly. I was like, you know what? I spot a hole in that slide, and I want to talk about it. I'm Pradeep Aradia. I run strategic alliances and sponsorships for the PDA, and the hole that I see in this sketch of people required for the new millennia or the new AI world, there's nobody on here who can wear a good jacket. How many people are starting doing AI projects? Hands up, come on. Think of one. Who wants to do it? Janek's doing it for the government, no less. Excellent. I love it. Nobody else? Come on. All right, for sure. All right, so next we have a very interesting person coming to the stage. And, throughout the evening, I've been hearing all sorts of strengths: Keep, biotech, fintech, high tech, all of these things about types of companies that we should sort of worry about in terms of AI replacing jobs and how they deal with it. All of this is for the future. And for the future, we need people who can do a little bit of, shall we say, government. So I want to bring up my good friend and neighbor in Manchester, Tom Hopcroft. I'm going to read you very briefly his bio. He'll tell you a lot more. He'll tell you what he's focused on. Tom is the CEO of Net Zero Institute. Net Zero Institute is all about carbon neutrality. He was previously the CEO of Mass PLC, and now he's actually running for state senate. And today he's going to tell us a little bit about his focus at state senate. Tom.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me here. I'm relieved to hear that was the intro because I thought I was going to be a magician. Because I early intro. So my name is Tom Hopcroft, and in fact, I did throw my hat in the ring to run for state senate in the second Middlesex, which is Somerville, Medford, North Cambridge, and half of Winchester. And really, I come from the tech and innovation world, and there's this paradox in Massachusetts where we are number one in so many things. We're number one in innovation, in education, and it's the best place to live. It's the best place to raise your family. We have a 400-year history of innovating and creating here in Massachusetts. And yet we rank dead last in our legislature. We produce the least number of bills every year, and it's a real challenge. And I think a lot of it comes down to work dynamics, and you really want to build a team. You want everyone playing a certain role on the team. And in our legislature, we have a team that has everyone playing one position. If you look at the typical person in the state senate, they've probably been there a decade. Some of them 2 decades, some of them 3. And the path that they took to get there is they were probably a state rep before that, and maybe a legislative aide prior to that. The point is, they spent their entire career. And by the way, I have no problem. I work with many of them. They're great people, dedicated public servants, smart. I have no problem individually. But as a team, as a board, as a 40-person board, when everyone is playing the same position on the field, it limits your range of view and the decisions that you can make. And so I'm running for open seat, and I'm running to bring a fresh perspective to Beacon Hill. The problem with such homogeneity in an org is also that it leads to some groupthink and incrementalism, and so I think that the the output that we've had has slowed, has created a life sail in the water. It has slowed, zoning policy and other things, which will lead to bigger problems, like around talent, people not being able to afford to live here. It's not just seniors aging in place, but young people starting their careers. They're doing the math. They could say, I can spend half my income, on my rent here, or a third of it if I move to, North Carolina or Texas or somewhere else. And so, this is a real threat to our innovation economy here, because talent is the lifeblood of our innovation economy. It also weakens us at a time when the federal government is going to try and ally into adversary and cutting our NIH funding and our NSF funding. And so this is, more affiliate, to backfill this with $400 million to keep those researchers here. But the House went and cut that in half and said it can only go to UMass, which again misunderstands, that I think there's not someone playing that innovation economy perspective. They don't realize the innovation economy isn't just UMass. It's, Children's Hospital, it's the Broad, it's Harvard Medical, it's Dana-Farber. It's an interconnected web of organizations. It's the immigrants that come here for our universities and stay here and work in the labs, and they spin out companies and they employ more people. And so bringing this kind of perspective, into Beacon Hill, I think is really important to have, a broader based understanding. For me, it's also personal because I have a kid who has a rare disease that we're waiting for, a cure to be found. And that cure, the person who's going to discover it is likely already here in one of these labs. And, it's apropos tonight we're talking about AI, because AI and mRNA and quantum computing, the things that we're needing here are the things that could really accelerate biomedical discoveries and allow more rare diseases to be cured. And the federal government has this idea that we can, just sprinkle, the wood got too much, the government will sprinkle it across all the red states. But what they don't realize is that the density is what matters. It's the AI researcher bumping the oncologist that creates the innovations. It's innovation at boundaries, it's bump factor, it's things like that you can't replicate. If we were, Governor Patrick used to say, if we were in Texas, we invest in energy. If we were in the Midwest, in agriculture. Here, our calling card is innovation. And so we invest in the people and the ideas, and it's important to keep that going. I think that's a perspective that Beacon Hill needs. And so as an open I'll stop talking. I can keep going on for the rest of the night. That was sort of here that was late. So I will wrap up. But I just want to say two things. One, we have our kickoff for the campaign on June 2nd. If you visit tomhopcroft.com, I'll give you information to hang out afterwards. I would love to have you join us. Doesn't matter if you're in my district or not. We'd love to have you if you are in a district, but even if you're not, your senator needs an ally. It takes a while before you can change the culture of a board. It takes probably about a third of the board. There's other good people running, and there's other people who are there. But even if I'm not your senator, your senator needs allies who understand how the innovation economy works, who understand technology and things like that. Anyway, I'll leave it there because I've probably overstayed my welcome already, but thank you so much.
So last night, Stephen and I were talking about the sequencing of this, and he said, you can go from Tron to Tom, and I had a nightmare of Tron. Oh, it's a tongue twister. But I think we got through it. I'd like to invite up one of our illustrious AI people now, Nirmal. I heard his supply chain AI project just got shut down, so he's got a big panel. I'll let you take it from here. Invite the panelists.
Thank you, Pradeep. I'd like to invite all the panelists, if you can please come forward. Is Neema here? Neema? Pradeep, do you see Neema? Oh, Neema is here. Okay, so we'll wait for Neema. Meanwhile, I would like to thank you, Tron, for the great keynote, very, very impressive. Thank you, Tom, for coming here. Steven, Pradeep, Steven talked a lot about me, so this is not just my show. This is a teamwork, so I would like to thank everyone for creating this environment. Cool. So we have a lot of smart people here who are in AI, and I think I'm the least smartest here. So we'd like to start first with the panelists, if you can start with introduction.
I'm never here.
I think we are not in the right sequence, but anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, why don't we go according to the order?
Okay, Janak.
Hi, I'm Jack. Sorry. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Been in office for about 3 years and came from life sciences and healthcare as a founder operator, as well as I was a venture capitalist for about a decade in the Massachusetts area, mostly in the digital health and the drug development space. Former U.S. Air Force combat search and rescue.
Hi, also I'm Liz Graham. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Mass Life Sciences Center. My background's been in a series of actually tech and software startups, most recently AI spin out of Northeastern before I moved into my current role. And just in terms of board background, been on a couple of public company boards, a few private company boards, a bunch of advisory boards, so lots to think about in this space.
Hi, I'm George Manley. I'm the CEO of an AI startup called Lucera. And I run the commercial real estate portfolio for the Jesuits on the East Coast, so all the universities you're probably familiar with. And I'm also on a number of boards.
Hello, so my name is Bernard Hall. I am the human resource specialist from Insperity. So we're one of the sponsors here tonight. Previously, before this, before Insperity, I'm a lifelong HR person. So I'm going to bring kind of my HR background, what I see from the job.
Hi, I'm Mahima Seshadri. I'm a principal consulting AI and data engineer at Akamai Technologies. I'm focused on various areas such as capacity planning, how to build the internet in a whole bunch of different places across the globe, digital AI and data transformation, how to get the workforce upskilled in the technologies, data and AI technologies. In addition to my day job at Akamai Technologies, I also teach at Northeastern University, AI, data, and big data, little data, AML courses. And I also lead a research group, AI research group with students from Northeastern University, students from Amherst, UMass Amherst, and with mentors from Dell, Cisco, MIT and whatnot. So if any of you all want to train the next generation of AI aficionados, please reach out to me.
Talk about your book.
Oh, talk about my book. Okay, oh, I forgot about that. In addition to, during the COVID world, people learned how to bake, learned how to cook, crochet, got a puppy, had babies, and what I did was I had so many ideas floating around my head as how to transform the world with data and AI before AI was a hype. So I had a book called Analytics for Business Success. So essentially what the book is trying to teach anybody to get off how to do data analytics, replace analytics and just call it AI, how to get it off the ground and how to kind of go through the analytics hierarchy and, so we'll talk a little bit more about this in this panel, so I don't want to take the thunder away, but that's some of one of the focus of the book, and it's available on Amazon, but I'm planning to share a few slides if that's interest to you, kind of summarizing some of my thoughts regarding the board and all that, what we won't be able to cover. So please reach out to me via LinkedIn and share some handouts. I always like handouts.
Thank you all the panelists for the lovely introduction, and it's a very diverse panel. Very happy to be here and moderating this amazing panel. So let's start with Oh, yeah. Nirmal Jingar, technology leader, working with Wayfair. I own the supply chain, some of the supply chain tier 1 systems and AI. I'm also on the board for 3 organization and board of advisor. I think I had to count yesterday, but like how many organizations I'm working. So it's like total 7 organizations as an advisor. So great. That's my introduction. Let's start with Liz or Ema, if you can like start with this and then anyone can chime in. Every board has a AI slide, right? What is the one most important critical thing that board is missing in those slides?
Great question. I think one of the things that in some cases the board's missing is AI expertise right now. I think, and a lot of people, it's sort of the consumerism aspect of LLMs, I think, has made everyone like armchair quarterback. Like, I know AI, I can build this stuff. But not a lot of people have actually executed on AI transformation in a sort of execution in business sense. So I think that there is education of the board as well as within the companies. And so I would say everyone's still, or at least many of us are still in learning mode. So I would say that inquisitiveness is probably what might be missing, and people are sort of jumping to conclusions based on their ability to train Claude to tell them what they need to think in the morning.
Yes, great points. That's absolutely right. A few other things which I feel boards need to consider is what is their investment strategy? What is kind of try to balance the short-term goals, right? So, for example, hey, do I need 5%? Do I need 5 people versus 10 people, right? So, a lot of boards are focused on headcount reduction, but then how do you balance this with what do you need to do now, like a quarter to quarter, like stock needs to keep jumping up, but then what about balancing your investment portfolio in the long term, right? So those are the pieces that needs some critical thinking there. And the other piece to think about is, and this is just not for AI in general, is kind of how do you embed any new technology in the workflow, right? So you kind of say, hey, I'm using Gemini, I'm using Claude, I'm able to increase productivity and increase the amount of time to critical thinking versus day-to-day repetitive jobs, right? So, but then how is that analytics, or how is the AI or some sort of productivity tool being embedded into the workforce or embedded in the existing tools and technology? So those are the things that probably boards don't care about because you're just looking at numbers. So that's just, there's multiple layers to that. So I'm happy to chat about that offline, but there's a lot of things they miss, and we want to, and folks like Nirmal are the ones who want to share with them what are the things should not be missed. Anyone else?
I would say 3 things, pretty concrete. So I sit on 2 academic boards, board of a defense contractor, a private equity funded company, and 2 venture funded companies in the health tech space. The 3 common themes that are beginning to emerge is kind of like a pattern is cost of revenue associated with AI. It's a pretty concrete metric to say how fast to the first dollar, both top line, and how fast to the first bottom line impacts using AI. So that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be what net new product lines can emerge out of AI, which means that your chief product officer and the chief revenue officer is now going to be directly responsible for identifying net new vertical. I would say the actual term used by the private equity and the venture folks is new verticalization associated with software products or even hardware products. And the third piece is going to be the cost of revenue attributed to an employee. Very similar to what Hema mentioned, saying that, all right, how do you rationalize justifying 20 employees, 30 employees? I mean, Nirmal asked me earlier saying, well, how many employees are at EOS, which is the agency I'm affiliated with? I mean, you guys can all go to mass.gov and see, but there are hundreds, if not thousands. Now, but in the corporate world, for example, one of the companies on Orof is a company called PatientPoint. It's one of the largest direct-to-patient advertising platforms. It's close to 400 million in revenue in the company. It's owned by Advent International, which is a premier PE firm. And Advent's first question on AI was, what's your revenue per employee using AI? So suddenly the question became less of, cost per employee or revenue per employee, but what is the revenue per employee, both top line and bottom line, attributed to AI? So those three, I would say, are fairly concrete across all the 7 boards I sit on.
Yeah, that's a really good data point and metrics. What do you think, like, who should own at the board level? Who's the owner?
Depending on the industry, currently the owner of revenue is a mix between your head of sales and head of product. It's usually tracked, governed, and administered by the technology and the engineering team, to be very frank. So somebody like Nirmal, somebody like me, is essentially responsible for operationalizing and functionally dictating how that metric is going to be tracked. But the owner is the chief revenue officer or the chief product officer.
I have a different viewpoint.
Right.
So why not the CTO, the CIO, COO, right? Those are some other folks we probably need to think about as well, right? So metrics, everybody owns a metrics in an organization. So it cannot just be the revenue officers. Revenue officers, probably some of the folks or the chief financial officers may write the check, but everybody is responsible. And the workforce is responsible to make sure there's 2 approaches to it, top down and bottom up, right? So as you know, the chief revenue officer and the chief financial officers are saying that, hey, this is how we should do it, but then the employees and the workflows, not AI, should measure metrics, right? Different viewpoint, but I thought that we.
One of the recommendations I made to the defense contractor as well as the PatientPoint, one of the companies, was we should onboard AI agents like we onboard people, number one. Because an AI agent is not just a set of prompts, but it has to understand the cultural dynamics, the philosophy of the company, what the history of the company is, etc., to really kind of modularize and normalize the recommendations that are coming. And companies are already talking about an AI board member, right? There are many companies like that. The one company I'm on the board of is called Jackson.ai, JXON.ai. They're part of the F-35 missile classification program with the Warfighter grant under U.S. Air Force. So, and they have an AI agent, or thinking about an AI agent as a board member. And the reason for that is because of the ownership issue, saying, well, who owns these metrics? Does the agent own the metric in the future, 5 years out? Or the product owner? Or is it a collective responsibility of the board to manage and govern that? So I leave you with that thought.
Charles, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, not on that one. I think that was all said.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. The next question is for you. If a board wanted to know whether a company is just building the capabilities or doing the cost cutting with AI, and what exactly they are doing with AI? Do you have any point on that? And also, what is the data point that board should know, and what is the metrics that the board should know?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things that are connected around talent and AI, and one of the things, having chaired comp committees and been the person in a company on the comp committee, is that usually you get very summary information about bonus structure, executive comp, but really I think for the full impacts of the things that him and Janet were talking about, you need to understand the both the compensation structure and the incentive structure. So a lot of us know the adage, what gets measured gets done. And I think if you are at the board level and you're trying to understand the impact of AI deployments within a company, you need to understand what the incentive structure that is built into that team is going to reward. Because I love the comment from Trump earlier about kill an AI initiative, because I think this is where things can go really astray with companies where, and some of you may have seen this, I know in my experience I've seen companies where somehow magically the bonus structure was paying out at 100%, but the company was only achieving 20% of goal. And so you have to understand there's something dysfunctional in the mechanism for what behaviors are getting rewarded in the company if you've got that type of dissonance within an organization. And I think that all of us have seen sales teams that kind of find magical ways to get to quota, maybe not in the most behaviorally sound path. So what I worry about a bit is that these discussions tend to be isolated within the compensation committee, and I think they need to be elevated to a board level conversation. Otherwise, I worry you're going to end up with conversations happening at two different levels that aren't connected to each other and really need to be, so you get this governance level conversation about, how are we managing AI, how are we looking at revenue per employee, but if you don't understand the incentive structures that undergird that at the organizational level, I think you will not have adequate line of sight as a board into how to harmonize some of that work, and if things are diverging, sort of why they might be diverging. So I would say probably, at least in the near term, you're going to want to take some of the things that are typically the domain of comp committee and kind of move them into a full board level conversation around incentive structures and how that ties in with your AI deployments.
It's really a good thought. So Liz and I was just talking before this panel about having AI agents as a co-worker, and also Janet mentioned about like AI agent as a board member. So Liz, you can answer, or anyone can answer, like, are we ready for that? If yes, then what we are doing. If no, then what we will do in future.
I could go. I think it's a very interesting question. So I don't know if you guys are very familiar with Klarna. So probably in 2024, they had a whole AI workforce reduction, and they kind of implemented a lot of AI for their customer service standpoint. 6 months later, they actually realized that obviously the cost reduction looked great, some of the metrics looked great, but from a customer service standpoint, they were doing poorly. They might have implemented it a little bit too quickly. And I think from our standpoint, and even from Insperity, that's kind of what we're seeing from the ground. We're actually seeing that board members are sometimes there's some over-reliance on metrics. So in the beginning, the metrics look good, the cost reduction looks great, but there's a question that they don't ask themselves, is the workforce actually ready for the new environment that we're bringing in? So that's kind of, I think that we've noticed from our standpoint,